Hi everyone. My name is Senthil. You call Senthil Velaitam, and you can call me Senthil. A brief introduction about myself. I'm passionate about cybersecurity, and I always try to advocate a security-first approach in my conversations with other technology leaders. I've had the privilege to interact with leaders from Microsoft, AWS, Druva, Commvault, Veeam, Cohesity, and various other organizations throughout my career so far. The way the session is going to work is how it was introduced earlier. So we'll go through the webinar and then feel free to ask any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. The ones that I can't, I'll take it down and then come back to you as well. So let's get started. Before we dive in, let's set the stage, right? So what is today's session is going to be about? Today's session is organized into 6 different key areas. You can see them here on the left. They are essentially the cloud security challenge. We'll be covering topics about AI and cloud security, threat intelligence, visibility and multi-cloud, topics about automation and response, strategy and roadmap. We'll move through each session accordingly, building your understanding step by step. What are the key takeaways I want you to take away from today's session? Right, these are the 6 key important takeaways that I would like you to take away. Understand the role of AI in modern cloud security architectures. Align cloud security strategy with your business and compliance objectives. So it's very key that you ensure that you're able to align your SOC's security strategy with your organization's business and compliance objective. Be able to integrate AI and threat intelligence into existing security operations, and we'll cover why it's important to do that. Leverage threat intelligence for proactive risk identification and mitigation. Automate threat detection and response using AI-driven insights. Enhance visibility and monitoring across your multi-cloud environments. These are just abstract ideas, right? So these are actually actionable activities that you can actually operationalize and take into action within your organization. Think of these key takeaways as a bit of I'd say a checklist. I'm hoping by the end of the session, you'll be able to put a check against each and every one of them. So let's start with the foundation. Why cloud security is so important and why is it so difficult and challenging? Let's start with the why, right? Why do we need a new approach in terms of how we deal with cloud security? So traditional security was designed for a different time and world. This is where the perimeters were clear, the assets were fixed, and the changes in the organizations are very slow. They go through the normal ITIL change management process, the configuration management, change management, release management, and so on and so forth. Cloud has broken all those preconceived opinions, right? Those environments, they broke all those variables. I'll walk you through each of the challenges, right? So what are the main challenges with cloud? The dynamic environments. The resources are consistently spun up and down by your admins, by your developers, or even if you're providing an orchestration layer to your end users, by your end users as well. As such, the traditional way of having static rules just can't keep up the pace with all those dynamic changes that's going on in your environment. Cloud has a distributed attack surface. In more than one case, every organization that are out there have a multi-cloud platform. Workload has shifted from public cloud to private cloud, and also to endpoint devices, and also even edge locations. As such, your multi-cloud and hybrid cloud setups create various entry points that's difficult for your security teams to defend. The evolving threats. Attackers, what we found nowadays is that they are able to adapt faster than the manual process can respond. So the traditional way of you being able to respond to those attacks are no longer viable anymore. Alert fatigues. All right, security teams are being overwhelmed with the amount of alerts that they receive in a single day. I've seen organizations where they get literally thousands of alerts that come in a single day. And the problem is they'll have to go and sniff through the entire alerts and determine which are white noise and which are the ones that are relevant for the organization. Now, let's look at how AI is able to bridge the gap. As you can see, each of the challenges are mapped directly to an AI. This isn't just AI for the AI's sake, right? This is AI changing the game. This is AI attempting to solve real problems that are out there in your organization. What are those changes, right? Let's look at it. Continuous learning. AI is able to adapt in real time to new behaviors and patterns that it detects in your environment. It provides a unified visibility. So you have multiple different environments. AI is able to aggregate the signals across clouds. It's able to give a single coherent view of your entire environment. AI is able to provide an automated response. So AI-driven playbooks contain threats. It's able to contain those threats in seconds instead of hours that we usually see with a SOC that's traditionally managed by humans. Smart prioritization. It uses machine learning where it's able to pinpoint and correlate specific alerts to risks so that teams are able to focus on issues that really matter versus all the noise that you see out in the market. The key insight here, and this is one of the main takeaways that I would like you to take from this, is that AI is not here to replace your security team. It's only going to strengthen and improve your security team, where it's going to be able to allow your security team to remove away all the noise, be more proactive, use AI to make more informed decisions, and get to a resolution quicker instead of sniffing through it with days and days through the audit logs and all that. The other part of this is that let's talk about those two concepts that go hand in hand: threat intelligence and multi-cloud visibility. What is threat intelligence? What is it? Threat intelligence is a curated, actionable data about active threats, attackers, TTPs, and indicators of compromise in your organization. It's able to provide those alerts in real time. It's continuously updating the intelligence based on emerging threats. These could be from malware, threat actors, attack campaigns that specifically targeted against your organization, and also against CVEs that is used that correlates to your products, to the products that you use in your organization. Threat intelligence is able to provide a proactive risk scoring. It's able to prioritize remediation based on actual active exploitation that is in the wild. It's also able to contextualize the alert. So it's contextualization and enrichment of those alerts, right? AI is able to map those threat intelligence against your environment. These are not generic, but these are alerts that are relevant to your organization. Here's a simple way to think about it, right? Think of threat intelligence as a large neighborhood watch, which is your neighborhood watch, that is connected to every single police station in the entire world. It's able to provide not only that crimes exist, information about crimes exist, but it's able to provide real-time information about the current crime that's actually going on in your neighborhood. So that's how relevant that is. The key word here is actionable. Knowing that the vulnerability exists is good, it's important, but knowing how that vulnerability is being targeted against the organization and the workloads that are running in your organization, that's actionable threat intelligence. Multi-cloud visibility. Gone are the days where organizations have a single environment. Nowadays, organizations have 2 or 3 cloud in their organization, right? So you'd have any organization that have multiple clouds, and at any point in time, there are active workloads that are running against those clouds. Multi-cloud visibility provides a unified asset inventory across all the workloads that are running in the cloud. It's also able to provide a behavior anomaly detection against in real time against the workload that are running in your cloud environment. Organizations will have a specific set of compliance policy that is set against the organization. Multi-cloud visibility allows you to correlate that compliance posture against the workloads that are running in public and also in private cloud. It's also able to correlate incident timeline with the root cause in your environment. Now, most organizations require a centralized view, and that's what multi-cloud provide. Multi-cloud visibility attempts to bridge, right? It attempts to bridge that consolidated centralized view. Without a centralized view, you have blind spots. In most cases, threat actors prefer a blind spot in your organization. An AI-based tool is able to ingest all the signals that it receives from this various cloud that you have in your organization. It's able to provide that in a centralized dashboard in one coherent picture. So it tells you what's in your environment, what's running in your environment, what is normal, what is suspicious. Another way to conceptualize this is to think of it as like a traffic air control. At any point in time, an aircraft that's flying in the sky does not have the full picture. It only has the visibility of what it's doing, what it is doing. But the air traffic controller is the one that's able to have a centralized view across every single flight that's flying in the sky. So that's what multi-cloud visibility provides. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? So what does AI-powered response look like in actual practice? See, when we looked at studies, we looked at research, what we found is that there's a gap between 280 days versus less than 1 minute. Now, that gap is actually quite staggering. Without an AI, an average organization will not even know that they've been breached until almost about a year. And by the time they find out that they've been breached, it's gone. It's literally useless, right? So you've already crossed the time where you can actually reasonably recover. Now, with AI-driven automation, containment of an infected workload can happen in less than a minute. Not because we've removed humans out of the picture, but we've actually automated the parts that humans are slowest at, which is to be able to detect, ingest this alert, and determine and validate whether those alerts are genuine or not. So the benefits of AI in threat detection and response is that it's able to provide a 24/7 coverage, thereby reducing fatigue for your SOC operations team. It provides a consistent policy-driven response. So you have a policy that you set against your organization. It's going to be able to reference that policy. It's going to be able to consistently provide and notify you of issues based against that policy. We've also found, and we speak to customers, that AI integration has actually allowed up to 90% reduction of false positive of the alerts that's being generated. It also allows the SOC team to get into to build faster forensics. It also allows them to go and build an RCA fairly quick. So gone are the days where you need to invest weeks, even days, or sometimes even months, right? Because you need to coordinate between two different teams, multiple teams to build an RSA. Right now, with AI integration, you can get that report out in minutes. Let me walk you through a simple real-world scenario, right? Imagine this. Imagine a scenario where your AI system detects an unusual API call at 2 a.m. in the morning or at a time when there's actually a public holiday. Believe it or not, 90% of a threat or 90% of incidents of a compromise occurs either during a long weekend or during the time when humans usually don't work. So it's post midnight and all, early in the morning. So it's fairly easy to deduce or simple to deduce that a human analyst might miss this alert or this API call at this point in time. So an AI goes to what we call a 5 phase. The first phase is the detect phase, right? The anomaly is flagged, based on behavioral baselines. So when you actually integrate an AI tool in your organization, essentially what happens is that the AI tool actually is going to go through a process where it's going to build a baseline. So once the baseline is built, the baseline looks at your average read write, your average copy rate, your average network throughput, and all that, and it builds that baseline. It builds the baseline over a period of time. So anything that breaches that baseline, it's going to detect that as an anomaly. So once it detects that anomaly, it goes to a second phase, which is what we call the analyze phase. So when it looks at the analyze phase, it's going to cross-reference that against an intelligent feed, right? It's going to look at that. It's going to say, yep, this pattern matches the behavioral pattern of a known anomaly that's out there. It's able to do this because it's consistently plugged into the internet. It's going to be able to detect and get the latest information about the latest threat that's out there in the environment. Now, once it does that, it's going to look at the rule sets that you've defined in your environment. It's going to be able to prioritize whether the alert is detected against an environment that is production, that is deemed as high risk, or it's against an environment that is dev, or it's against an environment that is non-production. Once it determines that it's against an environment that is high risk, it's going to start and enter into phase 4, which is the respond phase. In the respond phase, it's going to look at the automated playbook. It will fire up the playbook. It's going to look at that, and it's going to be able to do a few things, such as being able to isolate that workload. It's going to start looking at credential that was used against that workload or against that environment. It's going to be able to revoke those compromised credentials, and it's going to be able to create a ticket to your SOC team. Now, the phase 5 comes after this, right? So it's going to create that incident ticket, and your analyst is going to be coming into the office. He's going to be able to see a fully documented ticket, a ticket that has information about where this alert was detected. Was it at the primary data center? Was it at the remote location? Was it at the edge device? It's going to be able to tell you that I've analyzed this against the live threat. This is as old or as new as 2 days ago, a week ago. And it's going to be able to tell you that it's against this particular workload. So you don't have to spend time to determine where was this alert or API call was first detected. Moving on, it's going to tell you that, hey, look, I've actually quarantined the snapshot. I've actually taken a backup copy, and I've also changed that backup copy to an immutable copy. I've also isolated the workload. I've moved the workload. I've also disconnected the network connection for that particular workload, so it's not able to propagate or do a lateral attack across the organization. Now, you then take that incident, you then go through it. It could be a genuine alert. It could be an alert that was missed based on your policy that you would have set. It could be, so in that essence, it could be a false positive. So based on your reaction, that interaction is going to be fed back into your AI system. The AI system is then going to be able to learn against those feedback. So now you have a system that's going to look at the feedback. It's going to learn that. The next time it has those same alerts, it's going to be able to validate those alerts. It's going to be able to improve on what it has learned. So we've covered the what, the how. Now let's talk about so what, right? So why is it so important? How do you actually build this strategy against your organization? So primarily you have 3 pillars, right? First pillar is the business alignment pillar. The business alignment pillar is one of the most overlooked pillar in any organization. Every time when I speak to a security architect or a security SOC team, they tell me that, look, my leaders don't understand what I'm trying to tell them. A lot of times it's a struggle to actually get or put our business cases through. So security teams, if you look at it, they speak in terms of CVE scores or IOC counts, right? There's a complete disconnect between how leadership team speaks. They speak in terms of dollars, they speak in terms of business outcomes. Your job, and I find this, a lot of admins fail to do this, is that they need to translate the technical requirement into a business objective. They need to be able to map that. So in terms of business alignment, you need to be able to map security controls to business risk appetite. When you tell your business leaders that, hey, look, this AI investment is going to reduce our expected breach cost by 2 million, that's going to get conversations started, and that's going to probably get your budget approved. Now, that's essentially how you do it. So you'll be able to quantify the risk in financial terms for your leadership team to understand. So your security KPI is also directly tied to your business outcomes. So you got to be able to explain, so if we don't do this, this is what we're going to miss. This is how it's going to translate to a loss to the organization. This is how we're not going to be able to come up and serve our customers. Once you have all those data, you need to be able to present that in a view where your executives will be able to understand. If you're going to just present that as that, hey, we're going to lock this up, this tool's not going to do this, this is how we're going to change that configuration, we're going to block this port, we're going to make sure that the traffic's segregated to this VLAN and all that, they're not going to understand that. They want to be able to view how it's going to be demonstrated from an executive perspective, right? So they might be concerned about the technical matrix, but it's not really what that matters. You need to be able to present that in the executive dashboard that's able to translate that to a business requirement. The second part about is that SOC integration. That's the second pillar, right? So the SOC integration is more about pragmatism. Now, a lot of times, sometimes when I go talk to organizations and security architects, the practical approach is that you can't rip and replace. You can't rip investment that's already done against your organization. A lot of large enterprise organizations have already spent millions of dollars against an intrusion prevention tool, an existing SOAR tool, existing SIEM tool, right? Now you have to be able to layer those AI capabilities on top. So you have to be able to integrate and merge them together. So the key aspect is to start with one high value use case, and then you make that, for example, we're going to automate a phishing attack, or we're going to automate a misconfiguration detection or a configuration drift against your various cloud environment. So once you're able to prove that ROI and you're able to show that ROI, and then you scale upon that. So you start small, but then you build upon that. So SOC integration looks at how you are able to plug your AI tools into your existing SIEM or SOAR stack. So in a way, then you start with one use case, you prove your ROI, and then you expand further. The key part about this as well is that you need to be able to train your team on AI augmented workflows. Now, these are teams where they've been accustomed to using those traditional tools that they've been using for so long, right? Now, when you put the AI aspect into it, how do you merge that together? How do you train your team so that they can take advantage of those AI augmented workflows? The last bit is about feedback, and this is where a lot of organizations fail. This is where a lot of organizations don't have this capability. You've implemented AI, it's doing what it needs to do. However, you don't know how it's working, so there's no feedback loop from your team. So, because from a planning perspective, the AI tool from a marketing perspective will tell you that it can do X, Y, and Z. How does that translate into the field? So your operation team are the one that will be able to tell you, look, these sets of rules, these sets of augmented workflow works, these sets of augmented workflow is not applicable to our organization. That feedback allows for continuous improvement and refinement against the workflow. The third pillar is about compliance integration, right? So the good news is that AI dramatically reduces the manual burden of compliance. So when I used to work in the SOC team, when I used to work in the operation team, I'd be tasked to collect audit logs. I'll have to sniff through the entire system, export the logs out to a USB drive, hand it over to an auditor. The auditor looks at it and goes, well, look, I have from X number of days, I need the other information. And then there's a bit of back and forth. The other part of that as well is that how do you actually present that across to your AI auditors? AI automates all that. So AI automates the evidence collection process and makes it very simple for audits. So it allows you to do a continuous compliance monitoring versus a point in time, right? So it actually uses and builds against the existing NIST CSF 2.0 framework, the ISO 27001, SOC 2, and CIS. Essentially, what it does is that it uses policy as a code and enforces that across all the cloud environment in the organization. Now, how do you build that into an implementation roadmap, right? So we go through these 4 phases, right? The phase 1 is about understanding where you are. So that involves you doing assessment and defining your baseline. So you can't improve what you can't measure. And then moving on is phase 2. So phase 2 looks at a unified visibility, right? So it's the foundation for everything else. It allows you to have that centralized view for you to build on that and then move on to the next phase. Phase 3 is where you integrate the AI and intelligence. This is one of the most critical phases. How do you merge that together? Getting those AI information is good. How do you translate that to useful and actionable information to your organization? And then phase 4, right, which is the automate and optimize, which is the part about continuous improvement. Here, your team needs to look at the information that they get. How do you make sure that the information and the workflow is automated to a point where it removes your team from making mistakes and allows your team to make improved decisions? It also needs the feedback loop where you have a continuous feedback back into the system so that the environment can be continuously improved. And then based on those improvements, how do you optimize so that you ensure that the resources are used to the maximum capability? So we come to the key closing part, right? So building a resilient cloud strategy isn't a one-time project, right? It's a process. It's a program that you need to invest your time to. How I see it working and how I see it being successful in large organization is when the CISO or the security admin starts small, they prove the value of the improvement to the executive leadership, and then they're able to scale on that improvement slowly, right? So because change takes time, so it's important that the changes are implemented in a way where it's understood. So organizations that are winning at cloud security aren't the ones that have the most tools or the greatest tool. They're the ones that build intelligence and automation into the security DNA. They're the ones that start small and then build on that. I'd say no, because essentially, so what happens with AI tools, right? So it's not set and forget. So that's why it needs to be relevant to your organization. So every organization is different. And part of that tool is part of that ability is that you integrate it in your environment. Most of the tools out there in the market, once you implement it, it doesn't actually start showing up anything. It sits and learns the baseline. So it needs to read, you need to configure it, you need to have a predefined framework. So it's also important that before you implement it, you have a proper framework. What are your business risks? What are your compliance requirements? What are your frameworks? And then what are your recovery workflows? So essentially, think of it as an organization that has all these processes in place, but these processes are all manual, right? That's what we're trying to advocate with AI and cybersecurity, right? So essentially, you have all this framework in place, but given the human involvement in it, that it's going to take time to sniff through, to understand, to build those workflows, you're going to be able to plug those workflows into the AI tool. Now, what the AI then is going to be able to learn using large language modeling, it's going to be able to learn, it's going to be able to understand, it's going to be able to form and build those baselines, and then provide you with the alert. Now, when you start off, there are cases that you'd have false positives, and that's why the learning loop is important. So once you have the ticket that is sent to your security operations team, you then get the actual human involvement in that. So they are able to look and go through those alerts, where the alerts are much more human readable. It tells you where it got the alerts from, and then you're able to ascertain whether, look, that's a false positive. If it comes from this system in that domain, that environment, it's going to have, this is not valid, this is issues. So think of it as an environment where you should have all those frameworks in place. So if it's an environment that doesn't have any flags, doesn't have any classification of what's production, what's not production, what's dev, you're going to get a lot of false positive. And then that's going to give you a false sense of control. It's going to exactly translate into the issue that was asked. That's what I feel. That's what I've shared, and that's what customers share with me as well. That's one of the key concerns or issues that any team look at raising, right? So you would have heard in the news about teams being made redundant, teams being let go because AI is taking over the job. But that's not, that's primarily not related to security. That's primarily related to a lot of other mundane tasks that some other teams do in terms of answering calls and all that. With security, though, AI is not going to replace humans. At least that's what I feel. Based on what we've seen so far, it's only going to make the SOC team more powerful and capable. Because what it's going to do is that the SOC team it's going to empower the SOC team with usable and actionable intelligence, right? So in the past, the SOC team has to sniff through audit logs, understand what the alert is about, correlate that with a CVE that's out there in the wild, and even go back in and determine if that CVE is relevant to an application that's been deployed in the organization. They will then need to go back to the vendor, check with the vendor if the CVE is relevant, and so on, and so forth, right? Now, with AI being integrated into cybersecurity, so what it tells you is that it's able to do all those automated tasks because it has all those plugins, right? It's able to plug in to the security advisory. It's able to plug into the application vendor's website. It's able to look at what are the threats that's wild in the environment. So it's able to detect that. It's able to provide consolidated information. Your team or your SOC team is going to be more empowered because you're going to be focusing on more proactive tasks. You got someone that's reading the logs, you got someone that's reading the audit. You're going to be involved in building that framework. If situation A happens, what do we do? How do we isolate? What are those requirements and controls we need to have in place? Are we using the right set of credentials for the right set of workloads? It's going to help your decision-making process. It's going to help you to build dashboards and present that information to your business stakeholders. It's going to only make you become a champion if used properly versus making your job redundant. So in a way, the final endpoint data, the way it needs to be structured is that in an ideal practice is that AI does the hard work, you do the intelligent work, and you present that information to your executives. So you be the front, not the AI. Now, it's going to be a problem if organizations flip it the other way around. If they use AI end to end, then yes, you'd have that problem for sure. 100%. And that's what we covered, right? So the strategic or the static rule sets are built for a different time and age. It's built where the parameter, we know what's the parameter, right? It's going to be data center A, data center B. Or it's built for an environment where the assets don't change. You're going to deploy a hardware, it's going to sweat through 5 or 7 years, and then only then you're going to replace it. Or even a normal change process, how it happens in the past is that a vendor advises you against a threat. Now you receive that information, you're going to look at which systems impacted, and then you're going to go through your normal change process, right? Get it to CAB, get CAB to approve, get application owners to approve, and then move forward and implement that patch. Those processes no longer work, especially now with the agentic AI model. And I'm not sure if you've heard about Mythos and Project Glasswing. what they found is that they found tools. There's the agentic AI tool that's able to analyze code in machine level speed. It's able to combine multiple low level vulnerabilities and then build that into a higher vulnerability, right? And then it's going to target your environment. That whole process can be done in terms of hours to minutes versus weeks to months, and how it's done before. So that's drastically going to change how organizations need to adapt and respond to patches. Your normal change and patch management cycle are not going to fly anymore. You need to continuously adapt. You need to be able to find tools that's able to do patches automatically without reboots. It's able to do system remediation and isolate that environment, and then progress that at a much more quicker pace. So depending on your organization, but where I've seen it work very successfully, it is when it's integrated to your existing system. And I'd be very honest, right? I'd say I think the majority of the enterprise SOC and SIEM tool out there in the market have already integrated AI into the tool. It's about how you configure it against your environment. So think of it this way, right? So if you're going to do a rip and deploy a new tool, how's that going to react? How's that going to work with your executives? That's already sunk in cost, right? They've already would have invested into the tool. It already have operation team that's across the day-to-day workflow. It's best if you integrate it into your existing SIEM tool or a SOAR tool. Now, what happens then is that you build that workload, so you integrate AI into it, you go through training, you understand what has changed, and you ensure that your team is also trained against that. By integrating, you already have a baseline policy, baseline integration, how it needs to respond. AI is just going to automate a lot of the tasks. So when it automates a lot of the tasks, it becomes a much easier business case to present. It becomes a much acceptable return of investment versus a versus a rip and reinstall. Because a rip is going to require you to take everything away. It's going to need you to buy a new tool. It's going to need you to implement the new tool, and then you got to need to have training. You got to need to be able to deploy it across the environment. So it's going to take time. So being able to integrate existing tools, and most of these existing tools, how they plug in is that they actually plug in directly into the vendor's security advisory board, the good ones. So they're able to actually correlate and get real-time update. The moment the vendor releases the update, the system's going to actually be able to pull that information through. It's going to be able to go across your entire environment, look at all those tools that's being installed and running in your against your environment, and then alert you and tell you that, look, hey, here's what we go. These are the issues that we've seen that's out there in the world. So this comes back into cloud visibility, right? So a lot of customers out there, they don't have one or two, they don't have one cloud, they have multiple clouds, right? So you'd have a visibility dashboard that's able to go in and pick and correlate all those data, because each of these cloud vendors have their own alerting tool, they have their own reporting tool, and they have their own dashboard. So the visibility aspect of the AI is going to be able to orchestrate all that, provide you with a single unified dashboard, and it's going to integrate with your SOAR tool. So SOAR is your security automation, security orchestration, automation and response tool. So you need to be able to build your response framework. So this comes back down to the last part that we talked about, right? Your response framework, those 5 different phases. Once it detects the vulnerability, once it detects an abnormal activity in your organization, it's going to need to validate whether that alert is above the established or predefined baselines. If it's a yes, it then needs to take that threat and then be able to act against it. It needs to detect it. So it's going to use, hey, I've detected this abnormality. Can you check against the live system, against the threat database that it has? If it's a tick as well over there, yes, this is a known way or known method how this threat is going to be able to propagate in the organization. Once it's done, it's going to need to be able to look at and prioritize. It's going to need to be able to look and determine whether the workload that it's impacting is critical, non-critical, and that's all set by your predefined rule sets. Once it's done, it's going to need to be able to act against it. It needs to either quarantine, it needs to be able to take a snapshot of the data. It's going to need to move that workload into an isolated recovery environment. Once it's done, it's going to need to be able to inform your SOC analyst that this has happened. These are all the information. Go and have a look. Right? So that analyst then comes in, has a look at the environment, goes through the entire set, and then determines whether if it's genuine or not. So this entire workflow is what you call and how you integrate AI and how you automate that. Definitely where the industry is trying to go, maybe not more for, say, private cloud, but more around the public cloud environment where it's doing kind of like self-defending, self-healing, especially the part where it's able to automate that workflow, right? For example, the scenario that we talked about, how it's able to go through that 5 different phases where it's able to detect, analyze, prioritize, respond, and learn, right? So once it goes through that phase, that entire workflow, if you look at it, it's automated to a point where it's able to essentially move the workload into an isolated recovery environment. But then the actual recovery process requires human intervention. So at any point in time, if it's fully automated, I think there is a risk of reducing or too much automation is going to cause some concern. I see the final endpoint, the last phase of it, definitely needs a human intervention where it needs that validation, whether that's relevant to your organization or not. But it's definitely there. This one's a little bit abstract, right? So I think it'll depend on what is the security tool that's currently being used in your organization. But I think whatever tool that you use, you need to be able to leverage AI. So it'll be very subjective. So your organization could use tool A, which is different from tool B. But the commonality where I see is that AI is already integrated into the alerting mechanism. And where I see some tools slip up is that they don't have an automated workflow. Sometimes there is no integration with the SAW aspect of it. It's only mostly seen, but not SAW. So it also depends on how heavily you want to be invested into the tool, right? So what some organizations that don't have a SAW build an automated response on their own. So they do their own coding. Yeah, so we're talking about open source intelligence, right? So, attackers tend to utilize a lot of open source intelligence, Gen AI tools out there in the market, because believe it or not, a lot of tools that are production, that are being used by organizations have some sort of integration with open source tools, right? So having the ability for your SIEM tool to actually plug in to those security advisories, the threat analysis, that database is going to be able to get you to act more quickly, right? So instead of it being an isolated system where it's not connected to anything, you'd have to manually update the intelligence to it. So it needs to be a tool where it can actually go do its own data collection. So once it does its data collection, it's able to actually validate those issues and determine if those alerts that it sees it's relevant or not. I think it's important that I think this session provides a quick overview, a snippet. And I think it's important that users or security admins out there rely on AI and don't think of AI as a tool that's going to take away the job. Think of it differently. It's going to only allow you to be more proactive. It's going to allow you to be more clearer in the decisions that you make. And I want to thank AC Council for the opportunity as well to be able to present this to the audience. Thank you.